The storm had long swallowed the moon when the knock came. Soft, uneven, but louder than any thunder in the mountains of Njuru. In a village where darkness meant silence and silence meant safety, a knock after midnight was a thing of ancestors or curses. Baram heard it clearly. He stood still inside his clay and stone hut, the fire behind him crackling low. His hand hovered over a half-carved calabash bowl, forgotten the moment the sound reached his ears. For a moment, the old healer thought it might be the wind, the thatched roof rustling, a branch shifting on the trail. But then it came again. Knock, knock, slow, desperate, human. Baram, now 41, had lived alone since the fire that took his wife and son 4 seasons ago. He spoke little. He carved wood and tended herbs, and he had long stopped expecting anyone. But when he opened the door, his breath left him. She stood barefoot, soaked in rain, her earth-toned wrapper clinging to her skin and torn at the hem. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, not for modesty, but as if holding the pieces of her soul together. Her long black braids were matted against her cheeks, and in the dim light, he could see her lips tremble before they moved. "Please," she whispered. "I remembered your name. I remembered what my mother said. I didn't know where else to go." Baram's heart moved like an old drum, slow and unsure. His eyes searched her face. She couldn't have been older than 20. Her eyes were red, not just from rain, but from something deeper, like a storm that had passed through her spirit and left everything broken. He should have shut the door. That's what the world would expect. But her voice had carried something familiar. "Come," he said, and opened the door wider. He gave her a dry blanket, peeled a cassava root from the fire, and placed it in front of her without a word. She sat by the fire, dripping, shaking, and staring into the coals. The hut was quiet except for the storm outside and the sound of her teeth faintly chattering. "My name is Ayele," she said after long silence. "I was supposed to be married tomorrow, to a man I've never touched, never trusted. My stepfather promised me to him, said it would save our family, but it would have ended mine." Baram nodded, still not speaking. "I climbed through the storeroom window, walked through the valley in the rain. I remembered my mother used to work with you, carving gourds. Said if I was ever in danger, I should find you." Baram remembered. Ayele's mother, Tisena, strong, kind-eyed, with a voice like river reeds in wind. She used to call Baram the quiet tree. She had died 2 years after his wife. Ayele had her eyes. For a while, there were no more words. Just fire, just breath, just the quiet rearrangement of trust between strangers. The next morning, Ayele stayed. Baram didn't ask her to. She simply began sweeping the hut, laying herbs out to dry, boiling tea leaves. She never asked for more than a corner to sleep in and silence when she needed it. In return, she cooked porridge, repaired old mats with palm thread, even fixed Baram's broken basket handles with leather strips she found in his back shelf. Over time, like a wounded bird learning to rest again on a branch, Ayele began speaking. She was 22. She loved to paint, but her stepfather believed it a waste. He'd gambled their goats away, owed money, promised her in exchange to a trader named Yafan, a man 10 years older, cruel in word and hand. The village elders called it a sacred agreement. She called it a sentence. And so she ran. Baram offered her something rare. Not a rescue, but a space. Not answers, but dignity. He treated her like rain, unpredictable, cleansing, welcome when it came. But not everyone in Njuru was as quiet as Baram. The whispers started by the 4th day. "She is half his age. She came wet and barefoot. What kind of girl runs like he? That? Baram is hiding something. A widower should know better." Baram heard it all at the marketplace. So did Ayele. One afternoon, as she ground millet by the side of the hut, she looked up at him and asked, "Should I leave? I didn't mean to bring shadows to your door." Baram stared long at her, this young woman who walked through a storm instead of accepting chains. He placed his hand over his chest. "People will carve masks from silence, but we know what's under ours. You are safe here. That's what matters." Ayele smiled faintly. "You sound like her." "Like who?" "My mother. She said you never spoke much, But when you did, it sounded like a drum that knew when to strike. Baram allowed himself a small smile. But not all storms come with thunder. Some come in black wagons. And on the 7th night, one arrived. The fire in Baram's hearth was low when the dogs began to howl. Not the playful bark of village pups, but the bone-deep growl that rolled like thunder through Njuru's dusty paths. Ayele was in the back, pressing crushed aloe into a gourd bowl. Baram, sharpening a wooden spoon, froze mid-stroke. He rose slowly, his hands tightening around the knife's worn handle. Then came the sound. Wheels grinding stone, hooves pacing unevenly, and finally the hiss of an engine. A black wagon, not a village cart, not a trader's donkey, something metal, something foreign. Baram stepped out of the hut and saw it. A sleek black car, its shine dulled by the dust of long travel, now parked near the old baobab tree. The village square had gone silent. Shadows crept toward windows. And out of the vehicle stepped a man wrapped in silk and venom. He wore white leather shoes, too clean for these lands. A sharp gray robe, folded like a merchant's ledger. And in his right hand, a black cane with a jaguar head carved from polished bone. Behind him stood two broad men, their faces flat with intent. Baram didn't have to ask. He already knew. "Baram the healer," the man said, his voice like honey over thorns. "I hear you've been sheltering what belongs to me." Baram didn't flinch. "You speak of goats? Of millet? Because no person belongs to another." "I speak of Ayele," the man said, stepping forward. "She was promised, and I don't like when promises go missing." Inside the hut, Ayele pressed herself against the far wall, eyes wide, breath quickening. She had seen that cane before. She had seen it pointed like a weapon. Yefan, the traitor, the man who called her wife without ever asking her name. Baram didn't move from the threshold. "She is not yours. She was bought. She was born. There's a difference," Yefan sneered. "You speak like a fool." Baram stepped down from the threshold. "I speak like a man who's buried a wife and a child. I have nothing left to fear." The two bodyguards stepped forward, but Baram raised a hand. Not to fight, but to point toward the tree line. "You see that grove?" he said. "That's where the bones of men who tried to drag women away now lie with no names." The air thickened. Yefan hesitated. Then Ayele stepped into the doorway, not hiding, not shaking, her red scarf tied tight across her braid. "If you touch me," she said, her voice steady, "I will light your silks with the fire you lit in my soul." Yefan's eyes narrowed. "You think you're free because this old man opens a door? You are nothing. You came to me barefoot. You will leave in chains." Baram stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Take one more step toward her, and you'll find out what a quiet man can do with noise." The standoff stretched like rope and fire. Then, Yefan raised his cane, tapped it twice on the ground, and turned away. "You'll regret this," he spat. "I already regret not slamming my door years ago," Baram answered. The black wagon hissed away down the mountain road, its engine a fading growl swallowed by the hills. But the silence it left behind was heavier than the noise. That night, Ayele did not sleep. Neither did Baram. He sat by the door, spear in hand, listening, thinking. The next morning, they did not speak of it. But something between them had shifted. In the weeks that followed, Baram walked with Ayele to the outer villages, where the midwives gathered herbs and the potters spoke in riddles. He introduced her not as a guest, but as someone learning. "She needs paper," he told the old merchant from Wajaka. "And color." The man blinked. "She paints?" "She remembers," Baram said, "with her hands." And so Ayele painted. First small things. Leaves, birds, the worn sandals by the door. Then, one day, the painting of a house, Baram's house. The door slightly open, and standing in front of it, a girl soaked in rain, wearing a smile too fragile to last. "I wanted to burn it," Ayele confessed, "but something told me to keep it, to remind myself of the girl I was when I thought no one would answer." Baram looked at the painting long and hard. "She's still there," he said softly. "But she's also the one holding the brush now." But Njuru never forgets. And one afternoon, the elders called Baram to the circle beneath the judgment tree. They had questions with sharp teeth. The judgment tree had stood at the heart of Njuru longer than the elders could remember. It was where disputes were settled, oaths sworn, and once, long ago, where liars were made to kneel in front of the whole village with ash poured on their heads. When Baram arrived, he didn't need to ask why he had been summoned. 12 elders sat in a crescent beneath the tree's thick shade, their walking staffs resting across their laps. Old women with scarred cheeks and men with braided beards watched him in silence. The tallest among them, Elder Mokai, stood with a calabash of bitter root water in his hand. "You have kept a woman in your home," Mokai began. "Without dowry, without blessing, without question." Baram remained standing. "She is not mine to keep. She is her own. She came in the dark, without witness. And now men from the capital whisper your name with poison." Baram looked across the circle, his voice steady. "If your worry is noise, I can move to the cliffs. But if your worry is that I gave shelter to someone hunted, then perhaps this village has forgotten the difference between hospitality and ownership." Elder Jerima, the oldest among them, tapped her cane. "She is from this village. Her mother was one of us. You did right to protect her. But there are rules. There were also rules that let her be traded like a gourd in the market," Baram snapped. Silence. "A long one." Mokai passed the calabash to Baram. "Then drink and swear before the ancestors that your intentions are not to possess, but to protect." Baram took the calabash and raised it to his lips. The bitter root burned down his throat like fire. "I swear," he said, "and I would do it again." That evening, when Ayele saw him return with ash smeared across his shoulders, the mark of one who had stood before judgment and been released, she said nothing. Instead, she took a basin of warm water and knelt to wash the ash from his back. Quietly, carefully. That night, something changed in the village. A silence deeper than suspicion. A breath held too long. The next morning, Baram found a note pinned to his door. A torn scrap of cloth. On it, a symbol burned in soot. A jaguar's eye. Yefan's mark. Baram tucked it into his satchel and went about his work, but his ears stayed open. Later that day, in the village square, he found the old griot singing beneath the sycamore tree, a man known for planting truth in riddles. "Speak it plain, old one," Baram said. "What do you know?" The griot's eyes twinkled. "A man who owns too much must hide more than he shows, and a jaguar who loses a fight returns not with teeth, but with fire." Baram nodded. "He's coming back." The griot only hummed. "The question is, will he burn the hut or the whole forest?" That night, Ayele painted again, but this time her brush was different, her strokes sharper. Baram stood behind her, watching the image form, not of rain, not of escape, but of 3 women standing in a circle, facing outward, their hands interlocked, eyes closed, feet rooted like trees. "What is this?" he asked. "Us," she said. "Me, Mama, and someone else. I don't know who, but she's coming." "Who?" Ayele looked toward the window. "I think someone who will remind us we're not alone." Baram said nothing, but that night, for the first time in weeks, he lit the outer fire circle, a signal from the old days used to call nearby allies to council. It burned all night, and in the morning, a woman arrived. She came from the northern hills, her face streaked with red clay, her spear longer than any Baram had ever carved. She rode a white donkey and wore a necklace made of carved bone teeth. Her name was Sula, and she had once been a guardian of the river tribes before the drought scattered them. Ayele stared at her like one might look at thunder in human form. Baram welcomed her with millet bread and mango wine. "You summoned an old ghost," Sula said, grinning. "Does that mean you're ready to haunt your past?" Baram smiled. "I need your eyes, your ears." "Yefan's not finished," Sula nodded. "Then neither am I." Ayele watched as Sula and Baram spoke in low tones by the fire. 2 warriors of silence. 2 people who had buried too much to speak loudly anymore. Something inside Ayele tightened. Not fear, but readiness. That evening, the wind changed, and from the cliffs above the village, 3 more cars appeared. Black, sleek, crawling down the trail like beetles with tinted glass. Yefan had returned, but this time he did not come to talk. The cars stopped at the base of the village, wheels hissing like snakes in the dust. This time, Yefan didn't hide behind arrogance. He came dressed for war, not with spears, but power. 6 men stepped out behind him, all dressed in black linen, with no village markings, their arms stiff, their faces like stone. One carried a machete, another a coil of thick cord. Yefan stepped forward last, his jaguar cane tapping hard on the path. The village watched from doorways, behind curtains, above woven windows. No one dared stop them. No one dared welcome them either. At the edge of Baram's homestead, Sula stood with her spear buried tip first into the ground, her feet planted like the baobab. Baram stood beside her. Ayele emerged last. She wore her mother's wrap, the one with the sunburst pattern, faded but bright, and her red braid had been tied higher on her head, no longer limp. She looked like someone who had once run through a storm and now remembered she'd survived it. Yefan sneered at the sight. So this is the rebellion? A widowmaker, a river ghost, and a runaway girl? No, Sula replied calmly. This is the wall you can no longer climb. Yefan gestured, and one of his men stepped forward, rope in hand. Ayele didn't move. Neither did Baram. Neither did Sula. I'll have her, Yefan growled. You think your silly stories, your women with fire in their mouths, can stop the law? I own the land your hut stands on, Baram. I own the debts this village owes. And I own her. You own fear, Baram said. But fear doesn't last. Yefan's eyes snapped with rage. Enough! He raised his cane and pointed to the grove. Burn it! One of his men hesitated. Burn it now! The man lit a torch from the car's lighter and walked toward the edge of the grove, the sacred trees where Baram gathered herbs and Ayele once painted in secret. Flames caught dry bark, but then a cry broke the air. Not from Ayele, not from Baram, from the villagers. One by one they stepped out. Old women, men with broken tools, children, even elder Jerima, her cane trembling in her fist. This is our land, she shouted. Not yours. Enough, Yefan screamed. He stepped toward Ayele, fast, grabbing her wrist. But before he could pull her away, Sula was on him. With a twist of her spear's shaft, she struck his arm. Not enough to break, just enough to make him drop the cane. Yefan stumbled back. Ayele didn't run. She stepped forward. She picked up the cane and snapped it across her knee. The jaguar's head cracked, fell into the dirt. Yefan looked around. His men were frozen, surrounded. Even the villagers now circled them. Baram stepped closer. You've mistaken quiet for weakness. That's a mistake you won't survive twice. Yefan's breath heaved. He spat at the ground, turned, and hissed at his men. Let's go. They climbed back into their cars, the scent of burned wood and shame following them like ghosts. And when the engines faded, the village stood silent in the smoke. Then, Ayele fell to her knees. She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply pressed her hand into the ash-covered earth and whispered, I am no longer hunted. Baram knelt beside her. Sula placed her palm on Ayele's back. The village closed in, not as a threat, but as a circle, a ring of people who now remembered that kindness is stronger than control, that protection is louder than whispers, that no girl should ever have to run barefoot through the rain again. That night, the grove was still smoldering, but it was not dead. New roots would grow, new branches would stretch, and Ayele would begin again, not as a runaway, not as a saved soul, but as something else. Weeks passed. The smoke from the burned grove had long cleared, but the memory of what happened never left the hearts of those who saw it. What was once whispered as scandal now turned into story, told at fire circles and between sips of maize tea. But this time, it wasn't about shame. It was about courage. Ayele remained in Baram's home, but not as a guest. She woke before the rooster's call. She tended the ash beds in the grove, planting new herbs with gentle fingers. She fetched water with the strength of a woman twice her size. And in the quiet hours between dusk and full dark, she painted. Not for survival, for meaning. Her fingers stained with ochre and blue, she made strokes that told what words could not. A child's sandal at the edge of a road, the shadow of a girl's body turning back toward light, a cane broken in half beneath a rising sun. Sula did not stay long. She never did. But before she left, she gifted Ayele her river necklace, the carved teeth of fish that swam in the sacred north. You are your mother's daughter, she said. But you are more than her echo. You're a song she never got to finish. Ayele had no words, but she wore the necklace every day. Baram, too, began to change. Where once his hands only built coffins and mended doors, now he carved toys. Animals with moving limbs, birds with wings that flapped when pulled by string. The children of Njuru came more often now, some shy, some laughing loudly, calling him Gogo Baram, a name he pretended to frown at, but never truly denied. He and Ayele fell into rhythm, not romantic, not distant, something softer. Sometimes, in the hush of evening, Ayele would sit at the porch with her tea, and Baram would bring his chisel and say nothing at all. Just two souls breathing in peace. Until one afternoon, the painting arrived. Not painted by Ayele, but delivered. From a traveling artist who came from the east carrying news and colors on canvas. Baram opened the scroll and saw it. His own home. Not today's, but the one from a year ago. The porch cracked, the wood gray, the door just slightly ajar. And standing before it, Ayele, not soaked in rain, not fragile, but lit by the sunrise. Her feet bare, her back straight, and in her hand, a red scarf raised high like a banner. Underneath the painting were the words written in soft ink. Every girl who knocked on the wrong door now knows the right one exists. Baram stood in silence. Ayele behind him trembled when she saw it. "Who painted this?" she whispered. The artist answered, "A girl from another village. Said your story reached her, said it gave her the courage to say no." Tears fell from Ayele's eyes. She wasn't just healing, she was becoming a lantern. Months passed. And then came the festival of Ora, the village's day of fire and renewal. Ayele was asked to hang her paintings in the hall beside the weavers and storytellers. She refused at first, then agreed quietly, placing each piece not for praise, but for presence. Her most recent painting was different. It showed a door again, but this time it was open, with light pouring out and vines creeping in. Beside it stood 3 figures. A healer holding a chisel, a woman with a river necklace and a broken spear, and a girl, smiling not with fear, but with knowing. The people stared, not in confusion, but recognition. They saw themselves, their mothers, their daughters. Later that night, Baram stood beside Ayele in the soft torchlight. "You've made the quiet loud," he said. Ayele looked up. "No, I just gave it a frame." He chuckled. "That's louder than any drum I know." As the year closed, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from the capital, stamped with a red seal. Inside was a formal document, the first announcement of a new regional initiative, a shelter for young women escaping coercion, founded by a coalition of villages. On the back was a list of names to serve as its guardians. Baram, Ayele, Sula, and 3 others who had once stayed silent, but had now stood up. The village cheered. The same village that once judged Ayele now built a roof for her future to help others. And so, Baram handed her the deed to his workshop. "I'm tired," he said. "My hands ache more than they heal." Ayele stepped back. "But this is your life." "No," Baram said. "This was my past. You are my echo, but you're also my answer." She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just hugged him. A year to the day after she arrived barefoot and shaking at his door, Ayele stood outside the same home, no longer broken, no longer hidden. The porch had been repainted. The garden bloomed. The road, once overgrown, was now clear. A child ran past, holding a toy giraffe carved from old cedar. 2 women walked by holding hands, nodding at her with respect. And inside the home, on the wall near the fireplace, still hung the first painting, the girl in the rain, the smile of sorrow, the door behind her waiting to be opened. She touched the frame and whispered, "She's safe now." If a girl with nothing but a broken voice can stand tall again, if a man with nothing but grief can open his door again, then maybe there's hope for all of us. Sometimes healing doesn't look like medicine. Sometimes it looks like shelter. Sometimes it just looks like someone answering the door.